All right, cheers, Paul. Hello, everyone. So you can see the topics that Paul's laid out for us for tonight up on the screen, and I'll jump back and forth so we know what we're at before we move on to a new one. So the first thing we're going to touch on is reducing the size of your Statseeker data footprint. Now, Statseeker uses a proprietary time series database. It's very small, it's very efficient. And to give you a bit of an idea, you're only looking at about 1.2 to 1.5 gigabytes per 1,000 interfaces per year, and that covers all of Statseeker's data. So it's a very small amount, but we do have some players with very, very large networks, hundreds of thousands of interfaces. But regardless of the size of your network, if you do want to trim the data footprint for Statseeker, it is a tunable option, and that's something that we'll touch on right now. So I will just jump into the admin tool, and in the admin tool, under network discovery and advanced options, if we jump down to this advanced options that we see here, in the history section, we can see the settings for the retention periods for all of Statseeker's data. So we've got things like syslog and traps that you'll be forwarding onto Statseeker if you choose to do so. We've got the network events type data, so interface, threshold breaches, and device events. And all of those guys combined make up a very, very small percentage. The vast majority of your data footprint is here in the time series history, which, as you can see, by default, Statseeker will store forever. We're never going to average or roll up your data. But if you do want to trim that data down to just a couple of years or 3 years, as you can see here, it is just specified in number of days. So we can just jump in and do, I want to keep 3 years of time series data for my entire network. And that will reduce, it'll be run as a part of a cron process overnight, and it will just prune that time series database to get rid of the old data on a daily basis. Now, if you want to roll that back to the default settings, it will just be 0 or an empty string, an empty value. And you can see here, when it does go to an empty value, it does change it to forever. Don't type in a string of forever. The config file sitting behind this UI is expecting an integer, and it is specified in number of days. Do that and you're all good. If you do update this value, down the bottom, there's a save button. Make sure you save your changes before you pop out. Okay. The next item is we're off to dashboards. We're looking at working hours on your graphs. So we'll just jump back into this one over here. So what I've got here is we've got a firewall in the Berlin office, and we're charting the traffic that's been incoming into that remote office through that firewall. Now, the time access that we've got here, this isn't in the Berlin office time. This is in the Statseeker server time. So it's not my browser time. It's not the Berlin office time. It's the Statseeker server time. So we can see here that the start of we've got what looks to be our weekends, and then that's our business days rolling in through here. And we can see that the start of the business day, according to this time filter, because it's in server time rather than Berlin time, sits at around 6 p.m. So if you want to be able to view this, something like a time series data like this, and be able to see the business hours overlaid across it, it's something that we can do. And that's something that I've just done one up here. So the exact same data that we've got in this one, we've got it done here with our business hours overlaid specific to the Berlin office, the same for a Karachi office, and another one for an office in Denver, all sitting in different time zones. To do that, in your edit mode for your graph panel, over in the display tab, we've got this time regions option here. Now, when you're specifying the time region, this needs to be specified in UTC time. So Berlin being UTC +2, we're looking at 6 a.m. +2 and through to 6 p.m. That's the shaded period that we've spelt out here, and then just some cosmetics around how we're going to present that time overlay. You can add multiple overlays on a single graph if you need to, but as we've got here, it's just that these are the business hours for those offices. Now, when you look at something like these offices, like the data we're seeing on these graphs, it's fairly evident that this is the business day and this is after hours. But you will very likely have a whole range of data which doesn't conform to this business hours kind of, predictable and obvious bell curve. It might be a little bit more consistent. And so it might not be as obvious just from looking at it where the business hours are. So if you're looking for something like CPU traffic and you're looking for unusual CPU loads outside of business hours, like we've got here, where you've got a very extended period of very high CPU utilization outside of business hours, unless you know that there's something occurring on that server at that time, an agent running on that switch at that time, or whatever you're looking at, then it might be worthy of investigation. Okay. The next item we've got here, we're looking at, this is another data retention. We're looking at the Mac IP history storage. If any of you are on 5.5.4 or familiar with the features introduced in 5.5.4, we did roll out a new Mac IP package. Now, part of that package is a couple of new reports. Let's have a quick look here in the console. Yeah, we'll leave that page. A couple of new reports down in the general section. We've got the new Mac IP report and the Mac IP switch port report. Now, this guy here will record and present every Mac that's been seen on your network for the previous 7 days, vendor for the Mac, and the device and interface that Mac was associated with. Now, I do apologize. I've got a simulated network behind this Statseeker server, so I don't really have proper Mac IP data coming into it at the moment. So the device and interface that you'll have, if you're running this on one of your networks, you'll have complete data rows, as well as the first instance in the previous 7 days that Mac was seen and the last time it was seen. And then you can drill down from any of these Macs to see where that Mac has been encountered as it's traveled through your network, as it's connected to different wireless points or things like that. You can see where that device has been as it's traveled through your network. That default 7-day retention period is another tunable option. So that again is back in our admin tool, in our network discovery advanced options, back in that advanced options where we just were, but this one doesn't have it isn't exposed in the UI. So what you need to do is roll down to the bottom and hit the file edit mode. And the string you're looking for, and I believe it is actually in the documentation as well, is this nimcalc miss age time. So that's the Mac IP switch port age time. So this is in seconds. So that's our 7-day retention period in seconds. So if you'd like to push that one out to 2 weeks or a month or something like that, update this value in seconds and then save your changes. Do be aware that this, depending on if you're looking at something like a hospital or a university where you've got a very large, potentially a very large number of transient devices hitting your network, you may want to talk to someone in support, give Billy a call, and have a chat to him before you start cranking this value out to any extent, just to go a little slowly and see how it affects your data. Okay. The next one we're looking at is turning off default groups. So what I will do for that one is jump back in here and I'll use this server here. Now, you can see in the groups list here, there's a whole range of groups. Some of them you can see here, they're prefixed with this term interface and their interface speed and interface type. All of these guys here are default auto groups, which are produced by the server upon discovery without you needing to configure any rule to produce them. All the other groups that we've got here are either manually created and populated, or they've been created through your standard custom auto grouping rules. But these guys are done by the server without you needing to specify anything. If you'd like to hide these rules, these groups, so they're not in the middle of your group list, we can do that from the admin tool. So again, admin tool, network discovery advanced options. And again, we're going back to that same place we've been touching on for the data storage. We're looking at the advanced options and we roll down to the grouping section here. Now, this list is generated, it'll be different for every server because it creates a group and a rule to populate that group for every interface speed and every interface type that Statseeker's found on your network. So your list will be very different to what we see here. Now you can individually enable and disable any of those groups, the grouping rules that would be generated from it. This option at the top is across the board, turn auto grouping on and off. That will disable all of these auto grouping rules, but it will also disable any custom auto grouping rules that you've created to suit your requirements on your server. So unless you don't use auto grouping at all, you will need to go in and individually disable each of these rules and then go and delete the groups. So you can just jump into the add and edit groups, go and grab all of these guys here and delete them en masse, and that will get rid of them nice and quickly for you. Okay, and the last one we're looking at here is under alerting, being able to suppress alerts for devices which go down for maintenance. So if you know you're running maintenance on a device or a group of devices, you can suppress alerts from those guys without turning off the alert itself and potentially missing out on other devices, which would be, missing out on alerts for other devices, which you still want to hear about if they do go down. So let's just jump back into the admin tool here, and I'll jump back into this one. And again, so admin tool. And if I do go down to alerting and event management, we've got this event management option in here. Now, the way alerting works with Statseeker is whenever anything happens, you've got a device goes down or an interface state changes or you've got a threshold breach or something like that, an event gets created and added to a specific events database. The alerting system queries that database on a continuous basis, and when it sees something that satisfies the alerting rule, the alert's generated. We're not touching the alerts. What we're going to do with this is prevent certain devices from generating the event that would trigger the alert, so the alerts remain untouched. So we're going to add an event discard filter that we see here. I'll just call mine Thursday maintenance. And then you've got the event type you'd like to be suppressing. So in this case, I'm going to be pulling devices down. So I'm going to suppress all ping events and then specify either a device or a group of devices that are then going to have those ping events suppressed for. So I will go down and grab my Thursday maintenance group. So I can just update the contents of that to suit whatever devices I'm going to be updating. And then you've got a time filter. So any time means it's just on. And they'll always be suppressed, but we're going for a maintenance period, so we drop in a quick one, and it's going to be Thursday to Thursday, and the time period will be after hours. Let's go 6:30 p.m. through to 10:30 p.m. And that will then suppress any events, any device down events from devices inside my Thursday maintenance group on a Thursday between 6 and 10:30 p.m. And that way I can pull those devices down, do whatever maintenance, and we're all good. And afterwards, I can go and turn off the event filter, so then it's not going to be applied, and then I can turn it back on when I need to because we're doing another round. You can also set this one up rather than just a weekday or something like that. You can do something a little cleverer if you like, and go and set it up so it's going to run on something like the first day of the month. So we can probably keep all this the same, and then just drop in a month day equals 1st to 7th. No, it is a semicolon. Excuse me. I'll just clean that one up. 1st to 7th. And so it'll just be the first Thursday of every month between that period of time. If you're not familiar with the syntax that you can use these queries, there is it's all contained in the docs website. You can go through and there's a document around the time filters that will point off the syntax. There's a table down the bottom to do something like that. You've got the option to check it, event filters, which would then go and apply this one, and then over recent events to see, I'm not sure what devices are in this group. I should have checked that one before I ran it, to see if there's any devices that have gone down, just to see if, if they did go down in that time, you can check them to see if that would have satisfied the rules. And you've also got the option here to push it out to the advanced time editor to then go and test that time filter to see that it is going to be running the first Thursday of every month. It doesn't push that out into the future. It just rolls back to the previous start of the previous year to say, this is, if it was in place, these are the periods we would have suppressed for. So you can have an idea that your time filter, if you do something like that, is working as intended before you go. Okay. And that covers all the items we've got down for this session. Paul, Billy, if there's anything I skipped over that I should have mentioned on the way through, feel free to jump in and point it out. And likewise, if any of you guys that are in attendance, if you've got any questions about what you've seen, feel free to unmute and fire away.